Welcome to another edition of Warmaster's Workshop. Today in the workshop we're going to be working on some electronics. This is an intermediate level electronics tutorial. What we're going to be doing is working with the Adafruit Wave Shield. This is a sound device that plugs into one of these Arduino Uno small microcomputers, and it creates voice effects, like if you wanted the pitch of your voice to be deeper, or if you wanted to add some vibrato effects to your voice, or if you wanted to make it sound more monotone, or kind of hollow, like it's going through like a speaker system, sort of like think of Empire Strikes Back Boba Fett when he put his helmet on. In the original cut, you've got that real radio sound going. But yeah, and it uses, like I said, it uses the little Arduino Uno computer to do a good bulk of the work. But let's go ahead and open this up. This little board here costs about 22. I think it was like $23 plus shipping, so it's not super expensive. It's actually a really low-cost way to make a really cool addition to your kit. So we're opening this up, and we've got a whole bunch of little pieces here. Always be careful when you open these kits up. You don't want to lose anything. And I'm actually going to read off what's in this kit. First, obviously, we've got the circuit board, which is just a regular soldering pad for the most part. Let me get these organized a wee bit better here, because we've got various resistors and capacitors and all kinds of cool little components here. And I want to tell you real quickly about each of them, so you have some idea of what we're looking at. Alright, so let's start over here. Well, actually, let's start with this device right here, this component. This is the 3.3 volt regulator. It's a linear volt regulator, and it works off of 250 milliamps of current. The next thing that we've got are our microchips. One is a 12-bit DAC, and then the other one is the high current op amp. And then this big one here is this big chip is our level shifter for the SD card. And the next thing we've got is of course the SD card holder. And we've got this. This is a 10K potentiometer. Basically, what they call a variable resistor, but we call it a potentiometer. It's your volume control for this device. We've got our stereo headphone jack, and we've got this nice little tactile switch that's to reset the board. We've got our various little standoff plugins here. That's what plugs it into the Arduino, and we've got our resistors, which the resistors that you're going to have in this are going to be this is a 1.5K resistor. This is what is this one here? It's a 10K resistor. Looking up at my color codes here as I look over these. And then this next one here is a 100K resistor. So you want to make sure that you've got the proper resistors. And then we've got several different capacitors here. We've got, this is a right here, 0.01 microfarad, if I can get it, right here, 0.01 microfarad capacitor. It's just a little ceramic capacitor. And then we've got these four, which are 0.1 microfarad capacitors, not to be confused with the 0.01 microfarad capacitor. And then here we've got some 100, these are 100 microfarad capacitors. Then you got 3 of those. So that's all of the components that we have got to solder on to this this bad boy right here. It's a lot of soldering. There is quite a bit of soldering, and you want to make sure that you put everything on correctly when you do this, or else you're going to run into problems. So let's go ahead and get started. Luckily, Adafruit does give us a very good how-to on how to put this together, how to solder all this together. If you want to see that how-to, you can go to adafruit.com and then just do a search for Wave Shield, and that will put you right on to that that tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and start soldering this, and I'm just going to do cutaways as we solder it, and we'll come back and I'll show you along the way how this is going. One thing I would suggest is, if you don't have one, get yourself one of these little helping hands. They are awesome when you're doing soldering such as this. You're able to blow everything up so that you can see it as you're soldering it. Also, make sure you have a good soldering iron. I like to take and sand my tip down so it stays relatively sharp. But we'll go ahead and start soldering this, and we'll come back to it as we're doing it so that you can see how all that's done. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get started on soldering this up, and we're using our trusty 30 watt soldering iron, and then of course just regular rosin core solder. And what I'm going to do first is, on the sides, they're the little retaining posts for the SIM card. We're going to start there. The guide tells you to start at the SIM card, and I'm just going to solder the retaining posts. My soldering iron's probably not as hot as it needs to be just yet. One thing to remember about soldering electronics, you're not trying to heat up the solder, you're trying to heat up the pads on the boards or your little electronic terminals so that your solder flows onto those pieces. And it doesn't require a lot of solder. We don't want to get messy. Too much solder becomes messy. Alright, and we'll turn this slightly just so that we can see the other side. The great thing about these little helping hands is that you can just move the glass portion, the magnifying glass, to see what you're doing. Of course, then we've got to make sure we're moving ourselves around appropriately as well. And then one back here. And then, of course, we just try to pull up on it. Nope, looks good. Now we're going to do these little terminals along the back, right here. They're tiny, tiny terminals. You've got to be super careful when you do this, that you don't short them out. I like to try to hold my soldering iron as far upright as possible. Once you get this part done, you should feel good about your ability to solder. It does take a bit of a steady hand, but it really only takes a drop of solder for each terminal. Nope, looks like we missed one here. There we go now. And then we lower down to inspect this, and you can actually see it fairly well there. All the terminals have been soldered securely. There's no shortage. None of the solder pools are going from one to the other. They're all in that one general location. And I'm just going to make sure that this is the one I want to check. The first one that I did when the soldering iron wasn't as hot as I really wanted it to be. There we go. All right, now let's set my soldering iron back there for a moment. And we're going to move on to the next components. All right, so we've got all of our resistors, all of our ceramic capacitors, and our microchips in. So I'm going to go ahead and start soldering this up. You're going to have to flip the board over to solder it. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you push your posts to the side so that it will add the appropriate amount of torque to that piece or to that component, so that you can solder it well. And remember, you only need a little bit of solder. You don't need much. The great thing about the ceramic capacitors and the resistors is that they're non-polarity sensitive. So you can pretty much just stick those suckers in either way. Electrolytic capacitors are polarity sensitive, and they will pop if you put them in the wrong location. I mean, if you put if you invert the polarity on them, they'll pop, and it can be loud. All right, so we're going to position this so that we can see these a little bit better, move around. That's why these little helping hands are just the best thing ever. And we almost have those components are okay. So we've got all those components done. We'll clip them here in a little bit, but first we're going to go ahead and get our microchips all soldered in. Again, you want to be real careful. Now, if you've got a post in the way, if it's already been soldered, just a quick clip, and we'll clip it down a little more. I just needed to get it out of the way. Make sure that you follow the guide on Adafruit, and you will be good to go. You won't have any problems at all if you follow that guide. I'm going to set this down for just a moment. Spread these out so that it holds up this IC gets held up well. There we go. Now, you never want to hold your soldering iron on the components for too long, because they will they'll scorch, and you don't want that. I mean, heat affects everything. All right, so we got all our posts cut off, and it's looking a lot better on the circuit board. So we're going to go ahead and get the last IC here soldered up. And when I solder ICs, I like to put a little bit of solder on the first tab and then go over and go back under and push it up, melt the solder a little bit, and then you reach underneath and you push up, let the solder cool again, and you get it nice and flush that way. And again, you don't want to over solder, but you want to make sure you're using enough solder. All right, and now that's got all of our resistors, ceramic capacitors, and microchips are now all soldered onto the board. So the next thing we want to do is we want to move to the electrolytic capacitors, the voltage regulator, and then we'll move to all the other little extraneous parts here too. So let's go ahead and start working on getting the rest of these small parts on here. All right, so we've got our capacitors and our voltage regulator in. Now we're going to go ahead and solder those up. One of the things about the electrolytic capacitors that you want to make sure that you do is that those are polarity sensitive, okay? So you've got to make sure you follow the correct diagram on these. The long end of the electrolytic capacitor goes in the side marked plus on this board, all right? If you don't get that right, you will blow a cap. I know for a fact because it's something that my best friend and I used to be very fond of doing in electronics class in high school. Of course, our electronics teacher was not very fond of us for doing that, but, you know, boys will be boys. And we're just soldering in the voltage regulator at this point. One more capacitor. Actually, we've got two more capacitors, and then we'll have gotten, at that point, we'll have gotten all of the components, the electronic components, will be on the board at that point. All right, so let's trim these off, and we'll come back and we'll go ahead and get our we'll put our 10K pot, well, potentiometer pot, as we like to call it for short, and our stereo jack in, and then we'll put our standoffs, well, our plugs on, and then we'll be ready to roll. So we're still working on doing our soldering, and now we're at our trim pot, which is right here, our potentiometer. So this has some pretty big posts on the outside that are pretty much just for support. But we want to ensure that we get those properly attached. So it will take a good glob of solder, but if you keep your soldering iron on there and you work with it here, you will actually make it look fairly nice, like that, where you don't have like, I'll hold this up so you can see, so you don't have like globs of solder running all over the place. There you go. You can see it real well there. So it's nice and smooth. That's what you want when you solder. You really want these to be as smooth as possible. It doesn't require a lot of solder. It just requires a lot of patience. And I'm always a big fan of making sure my connections get the maximum amount of solder they need. Now we're going to go right up here, move this down to the stereo jack, and it has five posts, two of which are mainly retaining posts. Then the other three are actual connection posts. And again, I'm just pushing this up from the bottom so that I make sure I get a nice tight seat on the board itself. I don't like loose components. I don't like components that are sitting a long way from the base of the board. It just looks kind of sloppy. We don't like sloppy stuff. All right, now we've got those done, and at this point, the only thing that we have left to do is solder these plugins. All right, now we're at the point where we've got to solder the headers that connect the wave shield onto the Arduino computer board. So what I've done is, as you can see, I went ahead and put the header pins into the Arduino here, into the corresponding female slots on the header, so that when you put the wave shield on those pins, they fit the appropriate pins. Now you're going to have a couple pins here that aren't connected. Let me see if I can turn, there you go. A couple pins here that don't get connected, and that's fine. They're not connected on the wave shield, so it's not a problem. And then there's the same thing on this side as well. You've got two pins over here that don't connect as well. But the wave shield should match board to board when you've got it together like this, which it does. So that's how you know you've got it put together properly. So now at this point, all we've got to do is solder these pins to the wave shield board. One thing I want to do before we do that, I noticed this little remnant of the pin here is actually causing it to sit up a little high. I'm kind of a stickler when it comes to this stuff. I want it to sit appropriately because when I build the enclosure for this, which I'll most definitely have to do, I want it to work. I want the enclosure to work correctly. So, all right, now all we've got to do now is put our magnifying glass under this and solder those little pins, as you can see. So we're going to do that, and I'll start it out here, and then we'll probably cut away so that I can finish that, and then we'll come back and we'll start playing with this board a little bit and seeing exactly what we can do with it. We'll have to get a speaker, but that shouldn't be a problem. All right. And now the next thing we need to do to finish up this board is that we need to wire up the wires for the SD card. And although we're really not going to be using the SD card in this specific use as a voice changer, you may want to use this at some point for some different options, like triggering sound effects or something of that nature. This is still a very good board for doing that. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect these 5 pins, and we're going to be connecting them to some of these pins and then one pin over here. So basically this should be fairly simple. The main thing is just getting some wires cut, which is never a real problem. It's just it's always tedious cutting wires, especially if you want them to look good. I use a pair of nippers here because they just have a little bit better grip than wire strippers for something this small. And the main thing we want to do is just pull the casing back. So just making some rounds here. There we go. Now we've got, what we'll do is we'll make each of these little wires, and then once they're made, we'll work on soldering them in. All right. So I'm gonna get these wires made up, and we'll come back and we'll solder all those in. I'll show you exactly where they're connected on the board, so that you'll know. All right. So we've got our wires on here. I haven't soldered them on yet, but I just wanted to show you how I'm doing this. I actually saw this on a YouTube video that was also a tutorial on putting one of these wave shields together. So what I've done here is, instead of putting them on the top side, I'm putting the wires on the bottom side, the jumper wires. And the reason why I'm doing that is just to give it a little more cleaner appearance, cleaner look. You don't see the wires on the top. You'll see they'll be between the Arduino and the wave shield once it's attached. So I'm just going to turn it over real quick here so that you guys can see the little jumper wires all sticking through right here. And we'll go ahead and solder these up, and then our jumpers should be good to go. And always remember, you need to make really good connections when you're soldering. My soldering tip here probably needs a little bit of cleanup. I tried to take some sandpaper and sand it down. Really, keep a nice crisp edge on it. So we're just doing one side at a time here. And remember, the key to soldering well is to get the wire and the pad hot, because the wire and the pad is where you want the solder to collect. And then we'll turn this around. We'll just check the other side. Yep, that looks good. We'll turn this around. You'll know when the pad and the wire is hot enough because your solder will transfer right off the tip of your iron right to the wire and the pad. Just like that. And then we've got this wire here on pin number 10. Alright, so now we just have to clip these little ends off. Sometimes they want to be a little bit difficult, so I'll take an X-Acto under here and just lift them up enough to get my nipper on them. We'll have to tidy those up on that side a little bit. Alright, so we've got all of our cleanup done here. And as you can see, it's nice and smooth. We trimmed off those little wire ends. And right down here, that looks real nice. So when we couple it together with the Arduino, you don't see those wires. They're on the inside, not the outside. So it just looks a little prettier, you know, it gives it a nicer little profile. So anyway, it's now it's time that we actually boot up the Arduino and get our sketch loaded. So I'm going to cut this scene, and we're going to reposition the camera so you can watch the computer, and that way I can show you exactly what's going on with that, with the Arduino load up, so we can get the sketch on here and get this part going. All right. All right. So we've got our Arduino ready to go for the load up of the sketch, but I just wanted to show you the cable that you use for your Arduino. It's basically a USB printer cable, USB A to USB B, and the USB A side goes into the computer, and the USB B side goes into the Arduino. And you'll know it works when when your PC makes the little, the little music, the little doo-doo noise that lets you know you've plugged in a USB device, and you'll get a green light on the Arduino itself. So the next thing we want to do is, I've already got it open, but you want to open the Arduino IDE, which is the program that allows us to communicate with the Arduino. And when you open it up, you want to first go to Tools, and you want to check your COM port to make sure that the correct COM port is listed. So I need to change mine to 7. Otherwise, your sketch will not work. So, and once we change our COM port, let's go ahead and run a quick example sketch, just to make sure everything's running correctly. So we go to File, we go to Examples, we go to Basics, and we go down to Blink. And we don't have to change anything in the code. All we have to do is upload it. And when we upload, I'll show you this. When we upload it, so you get those little lights blink, telling you, hey, everything's working. Now, you can see that the little LED there is blinking, and that's what this sketch is telling it to do. It's saying, hey, blink. So what we want to do now is, I've already got my file open here, but you're going to download a couple things first. On the Adafruit website, you're going to download the uh, you're going to download two things. You're going to download the voice drivers, which is the Wave HC library. And if you if you click the link on the Adafruit website, all you got to do is just look for Wave Shield Voice Changer. It'll download it for you. And then you've got to head over to, they've got another link to head over to GitHub to get the AdaVoice sketches, because you're going to need those sketches in order to do the voice changing. So I've already got all that downloaded. All I need to do is load the sketch. So all we have to do here is double click this, and it's going to open another it's going to open up the another IDE window, and all we have to do at this point is just click on upload, and it's going to overwrite everything on the Arduino. That is, if our COM port is correct in this. I'll have to look and see. Yep, there we go. We got our little lights here, so we're good. So now at this point, all we've got to do, and I'm just going to minimize this, all we've got to do now is wire up our microphone to our wave shield, and then plug the wave shield into the Arduino. All right, so let's do that, and then we'll come back and we'll see how it all starts to work. Okay, so now that we've got our Arduino loaded with the correct sketch, I want to take a few minutes to go over our surface wiring and some of the extra components that you're going to need to add onto this in order to get it to work properly. Now there is an actual there is a line diagram on the Adafruit website. If you go to Adafruit and do a search for voice changer, it actually comes up on the search. But I just want to take a minute just to go over the components here, because it is important. First, we're going to go with this one because this is the second added circuit. It is actually it's called the Electret microphone amplifier with adjustable gain, or the Max 4466. And what it does is it uses a little Class D amplifier, and you can adjust this gain here to actually adjust the volume, the output volume of the voice changer itself. So it's not all on the it's not all on either the amplification speaker that you've got, or the whatever your input, whatever you're using for your input, be it a headset or a wireless device or whatever. You can put this in line with your incoming device and actually adjust the loudness with this. This is just a little potentiometer here. You have to have a real small precision screwdriver to adjust it, but it will actually make it fairly loud, and you can run it off of the 5-volt rail on the Arduino, and that's basically what we've got going on here. This red line right here is connected to, see if I can move this so you can see it, but it's connected to the 5-volt rail, which you can kind of see that 5 right there. It's connected to the 5-volt rail, and it's connected to the ground, and then it is connected to pin 0. The output, the audio output, is connected to pin 0, so that's how it gets into the shield. Now, the next thing is this 10K potentiometer. Okay, you have to add the 10K potentiometer because that is what actually controls how the pitch. So you can go from a really high voice, so you can sound like you're a munchkin from Munchkinland, or you can go to a really low voice and sound like you're a demon straight out of hell. But you adjust this in order to get the correct pitch that you want. Now, something you need to remember is when you adjust this, you have to hit reset afterwards in order for that new pitch to take effect. You've got to reset the Arduino so that it'll rerun the sketch and pick up the new pitch pattern. But this potentiometer is wired into the 3 volts, which is right here. You can see the 3. It's also wired to ground, and it's also wired right here into pin number 1 on the Arduino. I'm sorry, on the wave shield. So you can that's how you will wire it. And then if we turn it this way, I've actually got a little connector here that will plug into it, just a little plug. But move the camera here a little bit. There we go. It's a little focus. But there is our pin 1 connection. There's our power connection, and here's our ground connection. And then what I do is I take that and I just hot glue it on there. And the same thing for our input amplifier as well. I hot glue that on as well. I took a piece of electrical tape and I lined the memory card, the SD card slot, and then I did a hot glue onto that, so it's on there fairly permanently. Now, what I did was you have to take the little microphone that's soldered to this off. So I took it off and I ran this wire to a female stereo jack. Now I will put some heat shrink on this, heat shrink, in order to protect it. But that's the easiest way to do it so that you can plug whatever device you're using in there, okay? And then that will give you the ability to disassemble this very easily if you need to move it to a different enclosure or what. Now let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do, bring the camera up here a little bit. I'm going to just simply put this on the Arduino, back on it. And I just want to make sure that I'm doing this evenly on both sides. Yep. And I let these little lines here get caught between. That's where a jumper would go if you needed to put it there, but I let those little wires get caught in between there, just sort of holds them in place. Now at this point, everything is together. I've got my sketch loaded on here. I've got this all put together here, the wave shield, everything's wired up properly. Now, I do want to show you right here, there is an LED output here, and there's an LED output here, right here, if you can see it, right there. I don't know if the camera's focused well enough for you to be able to see it. Pull this down. There you go. See, there's one right there, LED 1. And there's another one on this side. This is LED 2. Now, you can wire those up. I believe those are powered from the Arduino itself. I believe one is the power and one is the data. So you can actually run those out, and you can put them, you can, whatever enclosure you're using, you can actually have those LEDs showing on that enclosure, and it kind of gives it that nice electronics, living electronic sort of look. One of the things that we've kind of come to love about electronics is the lights and all the glowies and that kind of stuff. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead and hook this up. I'm going to hook this up to my wireless, this wireless audio system, wireless voice amp system. So what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to plug this in. This is the transmitter, or I'm sorry, the receiver. All right, I'm going to plug that in, and then here is my speaker. I'm going to plug that in right here. This is the output. Now we're going to plug the battery in. And at this point, the Arduino is on. And you might be able to see there's a little bit of you can see the kind of a green light. See it right there? That green light is from the Arduino, so we know it's on. Now we're going to turn on our wireless right there. And you see that the green light is on here and here. So we know those are synced. Now let's go ahead and turn this on. And now we're going to use it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my headset off so you can hear this. It's actually pretty loud. You can probably hear it in the background right now.
So here is the voice amp with the voice changer attached. And you can change the pitch however you want. To do that, you just turn the knob here on the 10K potentiometer, which is right here. And then you press the reset button right here. And you just wait a few minutes, and you can hear that my voice is now a little bit higher. So let's turn it up a little more. We'll press reset again. And now it's really high. Actually, this is almost my normal voice.
So let's turn it up a little bit higher and see how it sounds. And we'll press reset.
And now it sounds like I'm a small child. We can even make it higher than this. I'm a munchkin. We're going to turn our potentiometer again just a little bit, and you can hear how clear it is. It's actually really, really clear, especially considering that the speaker here is a fairly cheap speaker. It's probably a less than $20 speaker, maybe 20 bucks. So let's press our reset button again. And now, well, we're still a little bit higher. I think we represent the Lollipop Guild at this point. It's very high, but it's clear. You can actually understand what I'm saying. So it's amazing how such a device like this can do such an awesome job. So let's turn it back down, and we'll get our pitch here lower. Now I really turned it down, so let's hit a reset button and see what happens.
Okay, now we're really low. Wow, that's too low. So let's dial it back up a little bit. Press the reset button. Okay, that's a little bit better, but it's still quite a bit low. I don't want to sound like I just crawled out of the 7th level of hell. So let's dial it up a little bit more. And press the reset button again. Okay, so that's better. That's closer to what I want. Maybe still a little bit low. There we go. Now, that's what I want. I want it to sound like that. So it's not so low that it's unrecognizable. But, yeah, that's what we want. And I like that tone the best. But it will take some time for you to dial it in to the pitch that you want. You just always want to make sure that you turn the potentiometer and then you press the button, the reset button. And it only takes about 10 seconds for it to reboot. So it doesn't take long at all. But anyway, we switch back to get my boom mic back on.
All right, so that's it. That is the voice amp circuit. Um, it's not as difficult to put together as you may think. It's just getting the wires in the right place and making sure that you have the right tools. There are some enclosures for this. Let me take this stuff apart real quick, and I will show you a couple of enclosures that exist for this. Now, just a word about the enclosures. Here's one. Now, I can't take any credit for this, obviously. You can print this file on Thingiverse, but depending on how you put your potentiometer on here, you may have to do a little bit of adjusting on this. You have to do a little cutting to get everything to fit right. I had to cut out a little bit on here, and then when I put my battery and everything in here, and I go to put the lid on, which this is the lid, it actually does not all fit. The lid does not fit back on perfectly. So I'm gonna have to do some cutting on this as well to get this to fit to get this to fit properly. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of alteration on this, but that's, you know what, that's fine. That's to be expected when you make a custom, when you make something that's, you know, when you do a little bit of customization to what's going inside of the box, you can't really expect the box to be perfect at that point. But I'll have to do a little bit of customizing. If I want to use this case, I'll have to do a little bit of filing down, or a little trimming on the side right here on this border. But other than that, and maybe a little bit on this side. But other than that, everything else seems to fit on here perfectly. It fits inside well. So there's another enclosure here, which I don't know why my printer printed it out so small. I think I'm going to have to go in and upsize it a bit because I can't even fit the battery in there this way. But this actually looks like a pouch that you could fit on your belt. Here's the back of it. And there's some screw holes here at the top. There's actually a little switch so that you could turn it off and on. But yeah, you can put yourself a little loop back here and wear that on your belt and then run it out to wherever your speaker's at. But anyway, so you've got a couple different options here as far as cases for your voice amp. And again, I can't take any credit for these designs. I saw these on the Cosplay Chris tutorial, and I believe they made them available on Thingiverse. So anyway, that's it. I mean, that's how you build your voice amp. I mean, your voice changer. It works with just about any voice amp. You want to make sure that you put it on the input side of your voice amplification. You do not want to put it on. You don't want to put it on the wrong side of the amplifier, because you will blow this device. You will destroy it, and that would be bad, especially after all the work and money you just paid to put it together. So anyway, that's it. That's it for this month's tutorial, and I hope you enjoy it, and we will see you again next time in the Warmaster's Workshop.